Thanks very much. Thank you. Tonight we're going to talk about lean enterprise and what that actually means. And a fundamental part of that is about this, building this idea of enabling innovation culture. One of the biggest challenges we constantly hear in large organizations is they're too big, too bureaucratic, too slow, can't get anything done. Executives have a vision for where they want to bring the business, but nobody knows how to bring it there. Everyone's executing in the wrong way. So we're going to talk to you a little bit about what some of those challenges are and how you can start to address them. How you can build a culture of experimentation in your organization. How does that apply to your portfolio? How you manage the products that you build. Not only the existing ones, but the ones that will keep you successful for tomorrow. And then finally, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the processes and practices that are totally constraining your organization, literally strangling it to death. And here's why. Today, your organization is still using practices from the 19th century. That's right, the 19th century. The accounting practices that McKinsey first came up with and applied to organizations are still being used today. Annual budgeting cycles, one feedback loop every 12 months, one theater show every 12 months, where we all spend those 3 months dreaming up those numbers, putting them in a spreadsheet. All right, people laughing already, okay. Then the theater, I'm going to go pitch the idea. I need 10 million. Well, last year I got 5, so I better put in for 7 because I won't get that. I need to get 6. And I know Mark's going to get 8, so I better put something better and a better tick together. And this is what we see, right? It's theater. And then ultimately, we just start working on our plans, plan, work away, work. End of the year, what do? We don't talk about what we achieved. We talk about next year's plan, because next plan is going to deliver more, and we're not going to talk about what didn't happen this year. And this is what happens. And it's fundamentally constraining for your business. Your processes still hold you back as well. Now, you think about the rate of change you're experiencing today, not only in terms of technology innovation, but also expectations from customers, social economic movements, demographics around the world, how that's moving. That's not keeping pace with the 19th century. And this is why we see things like in the S&P 500, where typically in the 1960s, companies lived for, in average, 67 years. Today, that's down to 15 and falling. And it's not just the old legacy companies, actually. It's the new generation. Technology-driven organizations are fundamentally reshaping our concept of what an enterprise potentially needs or looks like. It used to be an enterprise you needed to have 1,000 people, $100 million budget to do anything, hundreds of thousands of customers to be an enterprise, to have scale, to have breadth, to reach a large audience. But then you have this technology innovation, a WhatsApp with 10 people, 1 million in funding, and the same amount of users as the entire population of China. And you can think about that exec going into the board meeting in 2011, looking at the SMS track slowly going up. And all they were going to say is, hey, the trend line, I've got 4 data points, it's going like this. It's going to keep going like that. And it's gone. Their business wiped away. Why didn't they recognize the opportunity? Now they're just a done pipe, just a network that other people are leveraging. And you see this across the board, across the spectrum, with all these companies fundamentally reshaping and flipping business models on their head. The State of DevOps reports was one of the things we were working on when we were writing the book, and Jez was involved with this with Puppet Labs. And they studied 9,000 different organizations to understand what are some of the indicators for success in large organizations. And what they discovered was that high performance in IT literally doubles your opportunity to be profitable, achieve market share and productivity goals. DevOps, the practices, the collaboration between operations and delivery, how well that works across your organization, how quickly you can deploy changes at speed to your organization, to your customers, and learn what works and what doesn't. But fundamentally, culture matters, the way things get done around here. And interestingly, job satisfaction. Now, recently, are people familiar with Gallup? They do cultural surveys. The last one they did, what do you think the percentage of actively engaged employees in organizations was? One for the crowd.
18.
50. 18. Higher? Lower? 20. 13. 1, 3. 13% of actively engaged employees. Now I'm going to ask all the executives in here that classic question. What's the most important asset in your business? Who isn't going to say our people? So this is the challenge we have. Fundamentally, the greatest asset of our organization is not performing. It's not engaged. So when you start to scale that, when you start to think of the amount of people involved in these enterprises, 1% more, what improvement, what performance impact could that potentially have? But we're still in this world. A world where these people, you know these people? Also known as the scary business, still are afraid of these people, and vice versa. Technology always talking about the big bad business that lives on the other side. And what we're also starting to see is actually fundamentally how organizations are restructuring. You see new roles starting to come into organizations because they recognize that digital, the technical capability is important. They can no longer report to CFOs. They need to be part of the board. They need to be part of business strategy. As interesting, as Joanne and I were in San Francisco last week at the Churchill Club, an event where we had Vask Isker, who's the head of VMware, the CIO there, and he fundamentally was challenging the paradigm that if people like that are not on the board, if they do not have technical insight, a cross-functional team, business, technology, finance, marketing, if you do not have this group working together, understanding those capabilities, you're missing a huge opportunity. And when we started to look at and write the book and the different aspects that we saw, the real indicators, the things that made a big difference in organizations were these principles. Starting to see technology as a competitive advantage for your business. Creating a culture of experimentation and learning. It's a complex world we live in. You need to figure out what works best in your context. There's no simple answers here. There's no silver bullets. And that's why working iteratively and adapting based on what you're learning is so important. Reducing the learning anxiety of your organization, giving people space to experiment and fail, but be safe to fail. I'm working with an organization right now where there's a group of execs are leading a new initiative. They're trying to understand or create a disruptive business to actually blow up their own business. And one of the biggest constraining factors is the fear of if we don't get that winning idea, how does that hurt our reputation? It's strangling them. So if you want to have the ability to innovate at scale, you need to take these issues head on. You need to create them as leaders of your organization, space for these things to happen. So without further ado, I'm going to hand on to the real brains in the operation. Joanne's going to talk her.
Thanks, Barry. I want to start by talking about culture of experimentation. This doesn't happen very often, and we'll start by telling you a story. So, anybody been to California? Okay. Do you know about the NUMMI plant in California? Has anybody heard that story? So GM had a manufacturing plant in California. It was the poorest performing plant in America. The relationships between managers and the union, the auto workers union, had deteriorated so much that they had drugs, sex, and rock and roll on the manufacturing floor. Cars coming out of there were like there was deliberate sabotage on the product. GM shut the plant down. Now Toyota came and looked at it and said, we think the Americans are going to start taxing us for our cars that are manufactured in Japan, and we want to open a plant in North America, so we think we'll just use this plant that's already, provisioned to be a car manufacturing plant. And the United Auto Workers said, fine, but you're going to have to use the same people because we own car manufacturing in North America. And to everybody's great surprise, Toyota said, okay. So exact same people. What they did is they took these people over to Japan And they trained them in the famous Toyota way. That is where quality is built in on every step of the process. The people who are doing the work own the quality. They're able to pull that famous and-on cord, which says something doesn't look right here. Everybody stop what they're doing, come and have a look at it, and we'll talk about how to make it better. In 3 months, those very same people who were deliberately sabotaging product in the GM plant were producing the best quality of cars in North America, top quality cars. Now, this was an experiment that Toyota did, and one of the managers that was involved in this, his name was John Shook. He worked for Toyota. He was the first American manager within the Toyota Manufacturing Limited. And he came over and had a look at it too. And he was quite literally stunned at how the Toyota way had actually turned these people around. And it was a big experiment for Toyota too. But the takeaway was that it wasn't the people, it wasn't the technology, it was the culture that allowed the people to do the right thing. And oftentimes within our organizations, we don't set ourselves up to do that. Now, Shook actually, when he talks about his experience, he said, there's something essentially wrong with the way we're taught how to manage people when we go to management school. How many people here have their MBAs or, a bachelor's of commerce or something?
Put your hands up.
Put your hands up. We won't hold it against you. Okay? I'm here to tell you that a lot of the stuff they taught you was wrong. And you need to rethink it. Okay? And you probably learned that already yourselves, right? This isn't the way they said it would work in the book. So what our old model of thinking was that if we just change the way we think, if we give people knowledge and tell them to do something a certain way, it will change their behaviors eventually and it gets done. And he said, what they have discovered is you actually have to change the behavior, change the way people work first. And that in turn changes the values and attitudes and changes the culture of the organization. So it's a complete flip around where the execs get together and said, here's how we defined our culture, here's our values, make it so, right? Without really empowering people to decide how they're going to work to achieve that culture and the goals of the organization. So we often get this, and some people may have experienced this in their working life. I was talking to somebody earlier and said, I've been working for this company for a certain length of time, and this is probably the 3rd or 4th agile transformation I've gone through, right? We're going to train everybody up. We're going to have scrum masters. We're going to do SAFe. We're going to get Thoughtworks in and show us how to do agile, right? And then, when everybody sees this and understands how it's done, they'll just naturally do it. It doesn't happen that way because we don't allow people to change the way they actually do their work for many different constraints within the organization. Now, the concepts of lean and the culture of experimentation, when you apply them, what happens is you get more of this, where you look at your current condition, you have desired target conditions defined, your goals perhaps, and it would look, say, teams allowed to say, okay, with these goals in mind, what would it look like for us to work so that we have actually a new condition that's in line with the goals? And you have experimentation with short feedback cycles that gives you data on which to base decisions on where to go to next. And when I talk about short feedback cycles, that could be hours, days, weeks. In technology, we have the capabilities to do it within minutes in some places. So constant adjusting towards a vision or a goal. And as you get there, because your conditions change over time, the methodologies, the processes, even the way you worked may not fit that condition in the future. So you have to adjust and change again. That's what lean's about. And I told you the story about the famous NUMMI plant in Toyota. They shut it down in 2010. When the economy sort of hit the bottom of the barrel in the US. But one of the things that was interesting to me when I was in Chicago, a gentleman came up and talked to me and he said, you know, I've worked as a manager in a Toyota car manufacturing plant. And he said, even Toyota gets it wrong sometimes. They lose sight of what this is all about. Because in their efforts in Japan to reduce waste to the maximum reduction of waste, they have exact things like this tool has to go in this corner of your little toolkit, and you attach a bolt by going like this or like this. You can't do it any other way. He said, and that worked really well in Japan. But to transfer that exact same procedure to much larger Australians was a failure. And yet Toyota managers couldn't see that the conditions had changed and they needed to adjust. So bear that in mind as we talk, you know, and you think about how you're going to work. It's not about doing something once and expecting to get constant improvement. To get constant improvement, you have to be changing and experimenting constantly.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about portfolio management, because that's the most clearest reflection of your organizational strategy, where you're going, what matters to you, what products and services actually represent your business. But before I do that, I just wanted to talk about a couple of models so we're all on the same page. This is a classic from Everett Rogers, The Diffusions of Innovation, where we talk a lot about when somebody first introduces a new technology, a new process, a new idea, they have a competitive advantage. But that only lasts for a period of time, because ultimately things become a commodity or ubiquitous. Some people might say agile software development, when teams first took that on, was an advantage for them. But it's sort of become a commodity now over time. Who doesn't do agile? Everywhere I go, everyone's doing agile. But then there's also the idea of who or what products are targeted for. And typically, this model from Geoffrey Moore is the ideas that we've heard of early adopters, innovators, the people who are first to take these new innovations on and adopt them. Classically, there's a challenge about crossing the chasm to the early majority and so on and so forth. I often think about culture change is very similar to this approach. The type of people that you need to target when you start these initiatives. Don't try and innovate with the laggards. You need to find the people who are the innovators and support them and grow them. Because like all products, they'll have an innovation cycle, they'll be adopted, it will grow for a period of time, but ultimately all business models are transient. They will be disrupted, they will move on, something will change, as Joanne said. And this is why, for large organizations, these two modes of operation are very important, and they're very different. You can't manage them the same way. And we talk about exploring and exploiting business models. Now, typically for people in large organizations, they're much more familiar with the exploit world. Your business has been successful for a long time. Your products, your cash cows, keep the business running. You've loads of data about them. You understand your customers. You know if you make a small change, that you can probably forecast the impact of that on your business if you open a new market. Now, fundamentally, the measures and the techniques that you use to manage that, they're just mode operandum for the business. But then you have the explore domain, high uncertainty, new product development, new initiatives, new things that we have very little understanding of. There's a high degree of uncertainty. And they need to be managed differently. Because when you're learning, you need to make small bets, have small cross-functional teams, faster feedback cycles to understand if things are working or not. But yet, what we continually see in businesses is they get lazy. They use the same exploit mode operandum on the explore and crush it. Because when you're innovating, you're not making money, you're costing money. But it's about the success of the future, not about the success of today. And this is why I love doing this exercise with execs. I've even done it with a real bunch of execs that they'd like to think so, the Thoughtworks leadership team, where I got them to look at their portfolio and map everything that we were doing. And I do this with loads of execs, and it's a real fun activity. I recommend you go back and do this with your organizations tomorrow. Because all these modes are different, right? When you're working in Explore, you need to be making these small bets, loads of small bets. But what typically happens in most large organizations is, I've got the annual budgeting cycle, I've one shot, got to go for a big bet, got to go for a big number. Too big to fail, straight away. You need to be making lots of small bets, $1 bets, $1 million bets, $10,000 bets, whatever they are. Because guess what? Most of your ideas suck. I'm sorry, they do. Microsoft did a study where they hired a guy called Ronnie Kovacki. He was the head of experimentation for Amazon, then moved to Microsoft when they set up Bing. And he did research about all products that Microsoft had launched in the last 10 years. And what he found was that 1 in 3 products actually had a negative impact on the KPI it was designed to move. Another 1 in 3 had no impact on the products it was designed to improve. Only 1 in 3 had a positive impact on the key metric it was designed to improve. To the point where they believe like 60 to 90% of the work at Microsoft was actually generating no positive impact on the organization. So if you're making big bets, you're betting the farm. And if you're not betting that often, you're probably not going to be very good at it. So you need to change your models around that. Because not everything's going to work. But the ones that are successful, you're going to move those forward. And that means you need to start to integrate them into your business, break out of the small cross-functional teams, and start to engage different departments. But because the product is growing, you've more data, you've more knowledge, you understand how it works, you can start to transition from thinking about explore tactics to exploit and growing the team. And it'll continue to grow, but this is what happens. These things start to get successful, really successful, and everyone's afraid of doing anything to them. Because if we break the cash cow, the business is going to break. So anybody, don't touch the cash cow. Don't touch it. Don't touch it. And everyone who runs it is like, look how good my numbers are. I'm generating all the revenue here. How much are you generating, Mr. Explorer or Mrs. Explorer? Nothing. Right? And this is where things get crushed. Nobody thinks about killing things off. They exist forever. They keep adding new features, more features, more features, more features, more features, instead of thinking about how they can break it out into smaller things and start again. Start the innovation cycle again. Because ultimately, every business model will be disrupted. So, quiz time again. Everyone here work in large organizations? Give or take? So, you've got $100. Where do you think you're spending most of your money across this? How much is in Explore? How many of your initiatives are in Exploit, Sustain, and Retire? Now, I get to do this all the time, and it's so much fun. So I would love to say it's empirical evidence, but we'll just say that it's true. So what do you think the ratios are? How much do you think is in Sustain, for instance? 80, 90? More? How much do you think is in Explore in most organizations? 2, 1, less than 5?
Less than 1.
Less than 1. You know, because this is what happens, right? And literally what it starts to break down in Sustain, we've everything from 75 to 90. Retire, in often less than 5, between 5 and 10. Exploit, 5 and 10. Doesn't leave a lot. And then you have the conversation of people going, we don't do any innovation here. Well, I wonder why. And this is the problem, because people are in a mode of, I'm trying to protect my business. Execs running these organizations are thinking about protecting it. The 25-year-old in San Francisco trying to change the world, they're not thinking about protecting your business. They're thinking about a different business. And that's what's blowing you away. But what I like to do is set these things up. Like, put them in the middle of where your company are. Get your portfolio out there. Get people clear about what you're doing, where you're investing. Ask yourself, does this reflect the values of our business? Does this reflect our organizational strategy? Because it becomes very apparent very quickly. And I get everyone to hold their meetings here. Cross-functional teams, cross-functional departments, breaking down silos. Finance working with marketing, working with delivery, working with deployment. So everyone has an end-to-end view of how these products work and how they can help. I love talking about some examples. Anyone in this company and what they're doing? Even the cops are coming to get them. But they're just releasing more and more and more features. Who knows the last feature that Skype put in it? Who cares what the last feature was in Skype? But this is what they're doing. They're overloading themselves with just more and more features to try and stay relevant. Windows 10, anyone heard about this? Yeah, 18 different versions of one system to try and launch it. You think about Mac, they do it once. Now, I don't want to be too harsh on Microsoft because they are finding places where they can win. The Xbox has been a big success for them. They understand they can win at gaming. They're ahead in virtual reality of both Apple and Google. They're winning in that area. But how are they making more of that? I also like to talk about organizations who don't just focus on trying to throw more and more things onto a product that's not working. One of my favorites is a company called Butterfield. And they were building a games platform called Glitch. And it was doing okay, had a couple of different products. You know, they were thinking, this is sort of successful, it's doing all right. Now, what's the classic thing that happens with any product in a business when it's doing all right? We're going to make it a platform. Everyone wants to turn it into a platform because then we can put loads of things on it. And then everyone's going to love it. And then we're going to grow and we're going to take over the world. And this is the option in front of them. They had a chance to just keep throwing money at it. But they looked at their different portfolio. They looked at how people were using Glitch. And they found that there was this little tool that people were using to talk to one another while they were building. So instead of taking the $5 million to keep building Glitch, they invested it in a company that came this. Now, depending on who you talk to, this is worth somewhere in the region of $2 to $3 billion today. Because they recognized that there was other opportunities in their portfolio to invest in things to grow. And then when you start to think about how you can blow up these bigger markets, because everyone always tells me, yeah, Barry, but I'm in a real company, a big company, there's loads of stuff going on, and it's really challenging, and our market's never going to be disrupted because it's too hard to get into. And then you start to think about the kind of stuff that Elon Musk and his friends are dreaming up about, right? They're thinking about how do we get into these markets? How do we change the paradigm about what these are about? Because when the car came out, everyone's like, yeah, it's great, but I can't charge it anywhere. Okay, so let's release the thing that you can charge it. And let's only make it $3,500. And let's allow people to become entrepreneurs so they can sell their electricity back to the government. Small bites. The car is actually, in some respects, entering a market. Then the battery, because the real play is actually Gigafactory. That's where he's going. And this is providing an opportunity to leapfrog, to fundamentally change the paradigm of what energy is about, to allow the global south to just go straight to solar. Straight to solar. And he knows he can't do it on his own. He's working with other people. Toyota have also put in solar into Yellowstone Park. It runs totally on solar. Building a network. Breaking up the existing entities, the people who control these things, and opening a new market. So the only thing I ask is that you think about when you're looking at your portfolio, manage it. Think about how you balance it. Because the things that are successful today won't be successful forever. You need to be making those small bets for today, tomorrow, and the day after. Because they'll grow into things. And I think this is one thing Intuit are really fantastic at. Are people familiar with Intuit? They're an accounting company in North America. And they use this idea of sort of 60-30-10 about how they manage their different portfolios. They've got TurboTax and Mint, which they bought, but that generates most of their revenue. And then QuickBooks is a play to get into the small financial accounting aspects for small businesses. And when they're thinking about their 10%, they're building, I think, potentially one of the best products I've ever seen in my life. Absolutely has the best reviews ever on the App Store. You go onto the App Store, people are like, this thing changed my life, I love it, it's 5 stars, they'd be 6 stars if they could do it. But when they started the project, everyone says, you can't do it, never going to work, never going to fly. So 3 people got together and prototyped up an idea and tried to launch it. It's called SnapTax. What do you think it does? You take out your tax return, put it on the desk, take a photo of it, and it does your tax return. Done. Who wants that app? So this is what it's about when you're thinking about your portfolio, how you can manage it and the different strategies you can apply. But what's really important is not just thinking about these things in isolation, it's about thinking about it from end to end.
So, when we talk about Thoughtworks being a technology company and doing delivery, and I got involved with Thoughtworks through continuous delivery. Now, those of you who don't know me, my background is actually in IT risk and compliance. And how I got involved was that Jez started telling me the story about how continuous delivery works. He gave me his book, I read it, and I went, oh. From a risk perspective, a beautiful model that reduces risks significantly in software product development, because it looked at the development process from end to end and shortened feedback cycles to minutes, hours, days, whatever you were comfortable with. It said building that quality in from the ground up so that you actually don't introduce any flaws. And that got me started in thinking about end-to-end flow. So we do continuous delivery in certain companies, and we do it well. And the guys in IT come back and say, this is great. Now what's happened? IT is no longer the bottleneck for businesses to get new ideas out to customers. It's the business. And there are some parts of the business that are bigger bottlenecks than others. And we'll discuss some of these just to give you an idea of how this works. But when I'm talking about this, I want you to think about the larger organization, not just IT, although some of the examples will come out of IT. So going back to what I've just said, main obstacles, slow decision making, and a lot of decision making biases that nudge us towards making bad decisions. Your experience? Not that important, right? Your education? Maybe. Data points. That's where it's at. Okay? How do you get those data points quickly? Conflicting department goals, and we'll give some examples of that. And risk-adverse cultures and silo-based information. I was listening to a talk by Google, and they said, one of the things that the security person said there, to be safe today is risky business. If you're maintaining the status quo, you're increasing your risk enormously. So get used to change. So I want to talk about this model of command and control coming out of the 19th century again, when guys at the top who had all the money were probably subject matter experts for whatever industry they were in, and probably knew as much as there was to know about that industry. It often worked, the guys on the bottom were little peons who did exactly what they were told. And it kind of worked this way, up and down, where people at the top make the strategy, everybody gets aligned according to what the targets are set, and then people at the bottom execute the way they're told, usually standard operating procedures. It's good, works on a manufacturing floor in many respects, right? But then when you get in, and then what else happens is the reporting goes back up. Again, it very much siloed without that perspective of the end-to-end flow of the products and services to the customer. Do you see a customer in that picture? Yeah. It is really not geared to think about customers. So what's missing is a horizontal view of how all the different silos work together to create that end-to-end flow. This design model doesn't work for end-to-end flow across channels. You get a lot of reporting up and down, and many times that reporting is sanitized so that the guys at the top actually see what they want to see, and they don't have any idea of what's really happening in the bottom. We did some work with an organization in a developing country where we had the execs actually go to see how their decision-making affected the ability of people to do their work. And there was what we started to call the old F moments, because they would go, I never believed anybody would interpret that decision and that policy in that manner that would prevent people from doing the right thing. They found within their organization that over 50% of their work was negative value work. This was work that they created for themselves because they didn't do the right thing the first time. And that's what end-to-end flow is reducing that negative work and reducing waste that either just eats up your resources so that you can't innovate. The other thing about this model is that particularly in large organizations, you spend a lot of money just in the communication and the reporting. And some estimates are 10 to 20% of total enterprise costs are just in maintaining the system and that structure. So this is the way it usually looks when we have the traditional view, the organizational view. You have the business, as Barry said, the big scary business, and we got lots of good ideas, so we need money to put these in place. Then you create these big projects, and a lot of them get that sunk cost fallacy where I've put so much money into it and I don't want to claim the loss if we pull the plug on it, so I'll just keep putting money in it and hoping that it'll work. And was it Albert Einstein who said, what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. This is what we do with projects, okay? And then at the end, eventually you'll get the projects saying, okay, no more money, just put it in, warts and all. And it gets thrown over to operations and they go, doesn't work, I need money to fix it. So we're just creating more and more waste with this paradigm. We have to stop this process madness that often happens in enterprises. We're really good at planning. We have lots of processes in place that tell us how to plan. Who's got PMBOK or PMI in here? You've got all the Project Management Institute that tells you exactly how you do it. You'll have Scrum Masters who tell you exactly how you do development. You have accountants who will tell you exactly how to do procurement, or your procurement people. They all have these different organizations that provide frameworks for people to work with, and they go, this is the way you're supposed to do it. Okay? So, plan it, do it, plan it, do it, plan it, do it. We forget about the lean principles where you actually have these other two things in there, check and act. We're very good at plan do. We're not that great at check and act. And when we do check and act, it's usually too late to fix the main cause of the problems. And again, this is a huge risk. As the longer you delay check and act, the more risk you run. So really what we have to do is stop that madness of plan do and start going through the entire loop more frequently with faster feedback and real data. So the other big thing that we find about the organization structure is budgeting. What could possibly go wrong with this scenario? We have that big budget madness once a year. Somebody wins the jackpot and they get their project going. And then what happens is other people lose out. So some are saying, just keep doing what you're doing with the same amount of money. But by the way, we're going to grow more, so you're going to have to support more people, or you're going to have to do more in different regions, that sort of thing. And then there's people over on the right-hand side who actually get cut because they're a cost center, and we want to reduce our costs. So cost centers, you reduce your costs. Then what happens is that those people go, I know how to play this budget game, and I used to play this quite a bit when I worked in healthcare. And I would always have fights with the nursing staff when I was a dietitian running the foods department. And the nurses would say, we know how to reduce costs. We're not going to deliver ice anymore. Food service will do that, right? And you go, oh yeah, that really is not an end-to-end flow of reducing costs for the organization. All you've done is you just transfer that to another part. And so the operating people, more work, less money. And then what's shoveled over from the project doesn't work. So I need money to make that work. So again, my resources are continually dwindling. How many people have ever been on that left-hand side? Yeah, you work in IT. Yeah. Then at the end of the year, this is the biggest pain, and the worst thing we can possibly do is we reward people on their ability to meet their budget targets, right? So the people over on the right, great job, you get the bonus. The people on the left, you go, there's no way I can win. Absolutely no way. Because the targets were unrealistic. So how do you fix this? Well, first thing you can do is stop rewarding people based on whether they can meet their budget targets or not, especially when you're doing that big annual budget process, because there's nobody who wins that way, and particularly not the organization as a whole. Another thing we can do is to sort of lose this project paradigm where we have the business, projects, and operations working in isolation and silos and being measured by different things that are often conflicting, to more of a product paradigm. So this is where we have the small cross-functional teams, which includes members of the business who are responsible for delivering value to customers, setting their own targets, determining the way that they should work to reach those targets, reporting back up to executives, and you still have a reporting structure in place. But then you have something like with IT, maybe you have platform as a service, and you reduce your IT to go into the product teams, and then you'll have maybe ops management, a service desk. You might have infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, maybe security is in there, I don't know. And then everybody knows what the goal is or what we're trying to achieve, what is the value we're trying to provide to our customers. And everybody's focused on that target. I was telling somebody earlier, I used to work for an airline in Canada called WestJet, in their IT department. And one of the things that we would do is we'd take the IT people and we'd sit by the call center agent to learn about how they use the software while they were talking to customers. And Thoughtworks actually at the time was doing another project with, I would call it a communications company, where they did internet service provider, telephone service providers, cable service provider, how to streamline the interface into all the systems that the call center agents would do so that they could provide better service to the customers. But one of the things is you bring the IT people down and observe. So we were kind of doing user experience long before it was a popular part of software development. So performance measuring is the last thing we're going to touch on. And we often get this wrong in organizations, and it's often not managed to help develop end-to-end flow. It's often managed to encourage, how could I say, discord amongst the workers, because we're all measured on conflicting values. But what we need to do is stop measuring our outputs. That is, what are the activities we did and how many widgets we developed at the end, or how many hits we got, right? If you're talking about a web service. What you want to do is measure outcomes. Do people actually hit buy, right? Did we actually get them to choose a new service? So again, going back to my airline example, we started selling insurance, flight insurance, on our website. We were one of the first commercials to do that in North America. So we teamed up with a bank, and we said, you guys want to sell insurance? You got insurance. We got this website. People taking our service want insurance. Worked out a partnership. And we made buckets of money off it. And the bank was really happy because they were making buckets of money off the insurance too. But it was that sort of that experiment that we did, saying, what have we got to lose? And we didn't really lose. It was very minimal, because it was like, put this button here. We already knew how to do payments, and we just had to connect to the bank service, right? But it's that type of thinking that got us further ahead than our competitors. And we measured outcomes. It wasn't how many people actually hit the insurance button, it was how many people bought it, is what we were measuring. Here's the things you got to do with your measurements. Measure the things that matter.
And I think the most classic one for me is, I mean, you think about a product you bought recently, Think about when you really loved. What did you do?
Told everyone.
Yes. What did you say? Go and buy it. Think about when you first had an iPhone. I didn't because I'm an Android person. There's no better referral than someone you trust telling you to buy a product you love. So when I say SnapTax, and you go onto the website and you see people advocating for a product, that's your marketing done. Are you measuring that in your business? Do you see that as success? Joanne talked a lot about the outcomes achieved. We've a client in South Africa. They run a bank there. And one of the things they were doing was they had this great idea that they were going to digitize the bank. So we'll put kiosks inside, or not outside, all the banks, so anybody can just go and use their card, go in and out. Catastrophic failure. Great idea by management, catastrophic failure when they rolled it out. Because when they actually went and when they went and understood and talked to the people, they didn't want to be on the street taking money out for people could see them, or putting money in. They were afraid. So they still went inside the bank and caused all these queues. They couldn't bust them. But management had that great idea. It's worked somewhere, so it will work here.
Well, and they measured their success by, did we get the kiosks in? Were they installed? Yes, we were successful. We were on time and budget. Nobody used them.
So when you start to think about success, think about it in terms of outcomes, not outputs, not vanity metrics, not top-line numbers. And ask yourself, are we getting better? Is it getting better? So before we finish today, we just want to leave you with 3 things to think about. Have that big idea. Have that big vision of change. But start now, because your competitors aren't waiting for you. The startups aren't waiting for you. Because that's the way you're going to learn the fastest, by just getting in there. Innovation has to be a strategic capability of your organization. You have to be able to start to move products and services continually through your portfolio to keep you relevant, not for today, but tomorrow and the day after. And finally, we're all in the technology business. But that also means technologists are in the business. So you need to start appreciating some of the constraints and challenges that they're under and how they operate. Thanks very much.